Auburn has so many players where they could separate themselves from the pack or even who they were a year ago.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We're dapping it up on this Wednesday with the Darrell Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend. And Darrell, I've done this since as long as I've been in sports radio. We're on July 4th, and it's a day early because we're going to do recruiting tomorrow for Recruiting Thursday. But I always highlight the aspects of the Auburn football program, folks who can gain independence from something. And it's kind of an arbitrary thing. We've been doing it for almost a decade now, but I'll go first. I think the low-hanging fruit here, Cam Coleman, can he create independence, separation, if you will, from opposing defensive backs in the SEC, as well as the rest of the wide receivers? The talent seems to be there, Darrell, this wide receiver room for the first time that we can really remember, where there's true depth in the wide receiver room and true talent and true ability. But they've got to do it. They've got to do it. They've got to help Payton Thorne out and create separation or independence from opposing defenders.
Heard that term a lot last year. Anybody that was really kind of defending or taking up for Payton Thorne a lot of times would say, well, the wide receivers aren't getting separation.
Sure.
We heard it a lot in the Harsin era about not getting separation. So if Cam Coleman and the other wide receivers do that, that's step one to having a better passing game, to having elite receivers, to look different than it's looked like for a long time. For the first time in a long time, having a prospect that's a candidate to be in the league and get drafted on day one. So all those things matter. And yeah, it starts with getting separation or gaining independence from those defensive backs.
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge. And obviously Cam Coleman is the reason why we think this is more likely this year than previous year, because you've got that true number one. So you could have said Robert Lewis. You could have said Perry Thompson. You could have said Rivaldo Fairweather here. I chose to say Cam Coleman because I think if Cam Coleman can do it, the impact that it has in the rest of the offense and the rest of the receiver room, I think it's going to kind of have this dynamic trickle-down effect. We'll see if it pays off. Who do you have on the first of your list of folks or entities that could gain independence from something?
If yours was low-hanging fruit, mine's already dropped to the ground off the tree, because I think the Payton Thorne, gaining independence from his detractors, from his critics, by putting up a good year, a year that is worthy of an SEC quarterback. And in order for him to do that and not hear the noise and to get separation from the criticism, that's what he's going to have to do. And I think that's very, very important. It's important to Auburn's season. I know it's overplayed. I know it's talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But I just think it's that important of a position. And I think it's going to start and go. Now, he's got more tools and weapons around him to maybe gain that separation. But I definitely believe that's job number one for this Auburn offense.
Yeah. Happy Independence Day, hopefully, to this Auburn offense. No question about it. One day early. Yeah, Payton Thorne, can he separate himself from what he was a year ago, performance-wise, but also he's kind of carrying the reputation or the label, I guess, that he's a bottom third quarterback in the SEC. You look at any power rankings or any kind of list or grades that look at all of the potential starters of SEC quarterbacks, he's towards the bottom. I haven't seen any that have him higher than 10. Can he gain independence from that, right? To stay on theme. Can he become better or perform better than a bottom tier quarterback in the SEC? I think he can. And I think a lot of it has nothing to do with him. I think if he played exactly the same confidence level he did a year ago with the receivers and the scheme around him, I think he's naturally going to elevate himself. But of course, he wants to get better as a quarterback too. And I think it's realistic that he does that. So once again, I think it's a good one. And obviously it's the most important one.
And I like the caveat that you added to it. Gain separation from the bottom of the pack of SEC quarterbacks, where he was statistically and where he's perceived to be. And to get into that top tier would be gaining some separation on that. So that's a good one, Zach. Good job.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. My corny topic. We've been doing this for a minute. Hey, you've got one that you thought of last second,
I did.
right before we clicked record.
You talk about, free at last, hallelujah, free at last, and gaining your independence. The separation from Under Armour, gaining independence from Under Armour and going to Nike. Can't believe that wasn't my first one. But a lot of people feel like, it's just we were under a dictatorship or a domain rule there, and now they're free and
hilarious
for greener pastures, right? Oppression. There was that oppression, that Under Armour oppression. And so, yeah, gaining independence from Under Armour and going to Nike is really a natural one.
Well, we're now under a year out, right? Because it takes over on July 1st of 25, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, we're under start the countdown. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that is a huge one. And I am surprised that wasn't the first thing that came to your mind when we did this exercise. But another one that came to my mind quickly is arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest name on Auburn's roster. And I think he probably hasn't been talked about as much as he probably should. So let's talk about him in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Darrell, you and I both use the Game Time app whenever we need tickets for a concert or a sporting event. It doesn't matter what it is. Game Time has you covered, and you are a huge supporter of the free Game Time app.
I love it. I love the fact you can see where you're sitting. I love the lightning deals that makes it very simple to get the last minute deals. And they're like specials. They're running specials. You go to a restaurant, ask what the special is. Game Time has that on their app. It pops up, lightning bolts. Click on that, and it'll tell you basically a discounted seat that's normally a higher price. I took advantage of that for Fenway Park. And my seat wasn't behind a pole. I had great vision. It wasn't obstructive vision. Highly recommend it. Been challenged on whether or not if I use it. I do. I love it. And it's my go-to for tickets.
Baby.
Yes,
you
I
showed
did.
those receipts.
Yep.
Hey, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. I think there's been plenty of chatter, Darrell, around Auburn's running back room. And Auburn has a really good running back room. Jarquez Hunter, Damari Austin, Jeremiah Cobb, they're all going to be problems for opposing defenses, given the game plan. But it almost seems like there's been so much excitement about Jeremiah Cobb and not enough excitement about Jarquez Hunter returning for another year, that it almost seems like a lot of us have forgotten how good Jarquez Hunter is. He's a top back in the SEC. I can't wait to see how the media votes him at media days later this month, because I think Jarquez Hunter is worthy of attention and worthy of being labeled as one of the best backs in the SEC. My prediction is that he kind of gets that independence and becomes the true back. Because there's almost this discussion, Darrell, that it's going to be a running back room by committee, and it might be, but I do think Jarquez Hunter will be the clear back when it's all said and done. Plenty for Austin to eat, plenty for Cobb to eat, and I think they're all going to have moments. But this year, it's best for Auburn's offense if Jarquez Hunter kind of gains that independence away from the others and says, hey, I'm the oldest here, and I'm still the lead back for the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, I think that's an underrated point, that when Jarquez Hunter decided to come back for another year, look how excited would be if Auburn, how excited would Auburn fans be if Auburn went out and got a back like Jarquez Hunter in the portal? We'd be raving about that, right? Oh, but that's what it's like. He's coming back, and that's a very, very big addition to your roster or retainment of your roster. And I think the second point, we talk about Payton Thorne a lot and how key and integral he is to the Auburn's offense. Let's go back and look when Auburn played its best football last year, had that little streak of 4 wins, and then played really well against Alabama. If you go back, those are Jarquez Hunter's best games.
Sure.
So when Jarquez Hunter was at his best, Auburn was at its best, even in a loss to Alabama. When people want to say, well, it's Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, whoever. Well, he still played really good against Alabama, and that was one of Auburn's better games. So I think that's going to be key as far as how much we appreciate him when he comes back next year. And I also think he has a really good year, and maybe his best statistical year since he's been at Auburn. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to make Auburn play so much better. I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah. And then there's also, similar to the receivers, like, can he gain independence or separation or freedom from the opposing defenders, right, and kind of create his own space and hopefully many touchdown runs. But so much of that has to do with the scheme too, and we believe so much in what Freeze and new offensive coordinator Derek Nix is able to do. There's just so much excitement and potential about so many of these offensive skill players. We already mentioned several receivers and Payton Thorne and now Jarquez Hunter. The potential is there, and I can't stress enough that they don't need to be the best as a unit in the SEC. They just need to be top half, and I think that's good enough to really overachieve by like what so many people are expecting out of Auburn this year.
It blows my mind that this will be the fourth year that Jarquez Hunter is in an Auburn uniform running the football for Auburn. And I believe his first 2 years, Zach, like Tank Bigsby and others, the offensive line wasn't where it needed to be, so he had to really avoid tacklers in the backfield.
Yeah,
he couldn't get going downhill and going forward. Now, last year, we saw that. We saw some holes opening up. We saw him being able to run going forward and not having to dodge people in the backfield. I think it's only even going to be better this year as far as offensive line play. So just to think that it's the fourth year blows my mind. This shall be the best offensive line he has. He should come in healthy and ready to go, playing from the get-go, not having to knock the rust off like last year. And so I say all that to think that I would fully expect him to be a top 3 rusher as far as total production and yards in the SEC when it's all said and done.
You don't see many running backs stay at the same school for 4 years, especially that are that good.
Right.
Because I think he would have been picked up by an NFL team had he gone. But how do you think Jarquez Hunter is going to be remembered amongst Auburn fans? Like, what is his legacy? Like, I don't think it's carry on, but like, I think it's higher than like a Peyton Barber or a Cam Petway or a Cameron Artis Payne. Like, where do you think, as far as recent modern Auburn running backs, where do you think his legacy falls?
Well, first of all, that story is yet to be written, the final chapter. So
sure.
I would say that if he has the kind of year that Carry-On had his senior year, where he had 14, had the yards rushing, and then Auburn had a successful season with it. Auburn won 9 games that year, should have won 10. But if that happens, then I think he's right there. I do believe that he is just a nick above a Tank Bigsby, because of poor Tank Bigsby having to play behind the offensive line he did, and under the Harsin era, that Jarquez Hunter will be remembered fondly. And I think he has this year to cement that legacy, and I think he will. So I think he's going to be right there, mentioned in the same breath, not as a Trey Mason when they won the SEC title and played for a national, or Michael Dyer, but, obviously he played a lot longer and has a better Auburn legacy than Michael Dyer. But I think he's right up there with guys like you mentioned, like a Carry-On, if he does what he should do this year.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. His personality, like Carry-On's, was like really out there. Tank's wasn't really as out there as Jarquez. So I think that certainly helps too, just because of the nature of the characteristics of the Auburn fan base. All right. What else is on your list as far as folks gaining independence in light of this July 4th holiday?
Collectively, the Auburn football team gaining independence from a losing record. It's been, the last 3 years?
Too long. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been since 2020. 2020 was the last winning season Auburn had. They're going on a 3-game losing streak of losing seasons. And so this is the year to gain independence from finishing with the losing record.
I think that's great. And that's the ultimate goal and all of this. If Auburn doesn't do that, you got to have some tough conversations this offseason. It's like, what is going with this schedule? That should not be an option.
And I think with the talent, I get it. It's young talent, but still, we laugh and we mock at the people that make those predictions about the hot seat, like you and Charlie 5 talked about. I will say this: I won't be laughing and chuckling if Auburn goes 6-7 if people start talking about a hot seat for Hugh Freeze. I mean, that's just honest.
Yeah.
That's not in year 2. All you want to see is some marked improvement. No one's saying go from 6-7 to 11-2, but let's go from 6-7 to 9-4, 8-5, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I like that. The big picture look at, okay, can Auburn as a program and as a team break a trend, an awful trend of multiple years now with a losing record? That's when it's all said and done. That's all that really matters is wins and losses. And Auburn has not been winning enough over the past few years. So that's a great one. That's a great one. All right, I've got another individual, and you've got another kind of a big picture take. So that's coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. I think when you look throughout the SEC, there's a lot of folks that are kind of generating some hype as younger players, and rightfully so. That's the nature of the sport. But I believe Kayin Lee is going to kind of create independence for himself from being just kind of this other guy that was the backup to DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett a year ago, who are now both members of the Seahawks, to creating his own lane, his own space of being one of the best corners in the SEC. I'm stretching this a little bit. And I really just wanted an excuse to talk about Kayin Lee. That's just the truth here. But I think what he's going to be able to do is he's going to be able to separate himself away from this narrative of he's just another corner, and he's going to be the corner, not only at Auburn, but also in the SEC. So I think he's going to kind of create that independence of himself.
Not only would that be big for him, it would be a triple down effect or a double net gain when you look about what would happen with Keontae Scott on the other side. So if Kayin Lee becomes that kind of shutdown corner where he has such a big year that maybe people start going away from him, or it's going to give Scott take a little bit of pressure off of him, and it also will give him more opportunities with balls in the air like that for interceptions and that kind of stuff and turnovers. So it's a win-win, and it could benefit more than just one person. If Kayin Lee has that kind of separation, I think Keontae Scott could benefit as well. Yeah.
Then obviously, it probably helps the pass rush out. It helps your linebackers. It helps everything. You got that true number one corner like Auburn's had with DJ James the last few years. And before that, I mean, an incredible run of guys. I think Kayin Lee's the next one. So good spot to be in. Who is your what's your last one?
It's the recruiting class. For a long time, Auburn fans celebrated classes that were in the top 20 because of how that had to be salvaged, the top 15. There were even years that Gus Malzahn got Auburn in the top 10. I would love to see separation and independence from a top 20 recruiting class perennially and consistently to a top 10 and even perhaps top 5 recruiting class. And that could happen as early as this year.
That'd be huge. And once again, like that's in recruiting, that's all that matters is how high of a class can you get, and can you do that over an extended amount of time to the point where it becomes normal. And then if you have a top 5 to top 8 class 3 years in a row, you in theory have a top 5 to top 8 roster in all of college football. And that's what we're looking at. The thing that stinks is it just takes time, Darrell.
It does. But we've seen the natural progression of improvement. And then we've seen when you get that one or two player that's generational, how they're able to maybe draw other players into the class. And Auburn has a really good chance to do that this year. Last year, they piggybacked off the Perry Thompson, the DeMarcus Riddicks. Cam Coleman eventually came late. Cam Coleman didn't get to draw people into the class as much as Thompson and Riddick did. This year, you look at people, if you're able to get a Juju Lewis or a Caleb Cunningham, others want to get in that boat. And that's how you get from 12 to 4. And remember, Auburn was just 2 weeks ago when Alvin Henderson, who's another draw, who I think draws people into the class. When Alvin Henderson committed to Auburn, and they were in the top 5 for a little bit on some publications. So that's what's needed, and I think that you can do that, and I think you can do it by getting that one player that's generational that other players want to play with.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen kind of small sample size, really just last year, but he kind of saw Perry Thompson as the core guy in the class, which if you get Perry, then everything else is going to kind of fall into place, and it sends a message. It seems like that's Juju this year, right? Like, I don't know who else it would be. It seems like it's Juju. And if you can pull that off, then but they've got to do it. They've got to do it. And I mean, we've talked about him pretty much every show, but it seems like he's been made a priority, and we've got to figure out if it's going to actually happen the next month or so.
Well, I think he's a domino that when that
Sure.
first domino falls in this particular class as your highest rated player, then you have the opportunity to bring other people into the boat. And yeah, I think that's why he's made such a high priority, because not only the position he plays, not only his talent, but what Auburn realizes, they could also bring into the class and surround him that would want to play with him. That's why it's such an important get, and why there's so much emphasis put on it.
Right. So yeah, fun little topic, whatever, little July 4th action. One of my favorite holidays of the year. So yeah, we're doing it a day early because tomorrow we'll talk Cruton with Brian. So be sure to come back for that. And also later today, we'll be dropping a conversation with Elijah McAllister. Talks about the pass rush. Is the pass rush going to be okay this season? Darrell, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Follow me on X, Dap6410, Instagram, Darrell Dapp, and then with you on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yes. And yeah, be sure to check out the second edition of Locked on Auburn. We're calling it the little happy hour action. Every single day. Audio drops at 3 p.m. YouTube premiere at 4 p.m. So be sure to check that out as well. Like the video, please subscribe. We'll see you soon. This has been Locked on Auburn.